My brother trashed my vacation home and my parents said he's just young, you can afford it. So I told them I'd handle it. Their faces went pale when they received the bill and my new family gathering policy. The stench hit me before I even turned the key. A sour, sickly sweet miasma of stale beer, old cigarette smoke, and something else, something vaguely like vomit. My hand froze on the doorknob of the nest, my little slice of heaven, my weekend sanctuary. This was not the crisp, pine-scented air I'd been dreaming of all week. My name is Lacey, and I'm what most people would call successful. Early 30s, good career, and I'd poured a significant chunk of my savings and a lot of sweat equity into this small cabin by the lake. It wasn't fancy, not by a long shot, but it was mine. Every mismatched piece of furniture, every quirky painting, every carefully chosen throw pillow was a testament to late nights at the office, to sacrifices made. It was where I came to breathe, to recharge, to escape the endless demands of city life and, if I'm being honest, sometimes my own family. I pushed the door open, my heart already thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The scene that greeted me, well, it was like a frat house horror show. My beautiful, calm living room was decimated. Cushions from the sofa were ripped, their stuffing pulled out like grotesque entrails. A sticky dark stain, wine, I hoped, though it looked suspiciously like something worse, had soaked into the light pine floorboards I'd painstakingly sanded and sealed myself. Empty beer cans and crushed plastic cups littered every surface, some overflowing with cigarette butts. My antique coffee table, a flea market find I'd lovingly restored, had a deep jagged crack across its surface, as if someone had danced on it or jumped. No, I whispered, the sound swallowed by the sudden oppressive silence of the trash space. No, no, no. I walked further in, my weekend bag dropping from my nerveless fingers. The kitchen was worse. The fridge door hung open, its contents, or what was left of them, spilled onto the floor in a congealing mess. Broken glass crunched under my boots. Someone had taken a marker, a thick black permanent one, and drawn crude images on the cupboard doors. My carefully curated collection of artisanal mugs, gifts from friends, souvenirs from travels, smashed. All of them. Even the little chipped one I'd kept because it reminded me of my grandmother. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and angry. This wasn't just mess. This was malicious. This was a violation. I forced myself to check the rest of the small cabin. The bathroom mirror was cracked, a spiderweb of fractures radiating from a central impact point. My bedroom, they'd been in my bedroom. My sheets were gone, the mattress stained. Perfume bottles I'd cherished were empty, their contents likely sprayed around with abandon. A small antique jewelry box, usually tucked away in a drawer, lay open and empty on the floor. It hadn't held much of monetary value, but the few pieces inside were sentimental. My breath hitched. Who would do this? And how did they even get in? I always locked up tight, always. Then I remembered the spare key, the one I'd reluctantly given my parents for emergencies. An emergency like Brad, my younger brother, needing a place to crash with his deadbeat friends, apparently. A cold dread, quickly followed by a white-hot rage, washed over me. I'd installed a small, discreet security camera facing the main entrance after a minor break-in scare in the neighborhood last year. It fed to a cloud service. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely operate my phone, but I pulled up the app. There it was, time-stamped 3 nights ago. The footage was grainy but clear enough, Brad, grinning like an idiot, fumbling with the key, then ushering in a troop of about 10 other guys and girls. I watched, my stomach churning, as the camera recorded snippets of their party, them dragging my furniture around, loud music thumping even through the phone's tiny speaker, someone swinging from the exposed beam I loved so much. I fast-forwarded, my disgust growing with every frame. Then I saw Brad, clearly drunk, pick up one of my framed art prints, a limited edition I'd saved for months to buy, and hurl it like a frisbee across the room, where it shattered against the wall. He and his friends roared with laughter. My blood ran cold, then boiled. He hadn't just trashed my home. He'd flaunted it. As if that wasn't enough, as I scrolled through the last bits of footage from the next morning showing them finally leaving in a state of disarray, I saw Brad pause by the door. He looked directly at the camera, a smirk on his face, then scribbled something on a piece of paper and stuck it to the fridge with one of my magnets. I walked back into the kitchen, my gaze fixed on the fridge. There, amidst the marker graffiti, was a crumpled napkin. Scrawled on it in Brad's unmistakable messy handwriting were just 2 words: chill out. Chill out. My sanctuary, my peace, my hard-earned property systematically destroyed, and his message was chill out. He hadn't just trashed my home, he'd spat in my face. Chill out. The 2 words echoed in the trashed silence of my kitchen. My hands clenched so tight my nails bit into my palms. I took a deep, shuddering breath, not of calm, but of icy resolve. Oh, I was past chilling out. Way past. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over Brad's contact. He picked up on the 3rd ring, his voice lazy and still thick with sleep even though it was early afternoon. Yo. Brad, I said, my voice dangerously low. You need to get over to the nest. Now. Huh? Lacey, what's up? Can't, man. I'm kind of wrecked. Epic night. He actually chuckled. I'm sure it was, I said, the sarcasm practically dripping. I'm at the cabin, Brad. I've seen the epic night all over my floor, my walls, my furniture. A pause, then a sigh, not of remorse, but of annoyance. Oh, that. Look, Lace, we got a bit carried away. It's no biggie. We'll, tidy up next time we're up there. Next time. My voice rose despite my efforts to keep it level. There won't be a next time. You deliberately trashed my home, my things I worked for. Geez, chill out. It's just stuff, he said, the exact words from his stupid note. Stuff can be replaced. You're loaded anyway. What's the big deal? The big deal, Brad, I enunciated each word carefully, is that you are an entitled, destructive brat who has finally crossed a line. You have 5 minutes to call me back and tell me you're on your way here to see this with your own eyes. Otherwise, I'm calling the police. That was a bluff, mostly. Dealing with the cops would be a nightmare, but he didn't need to know that. Police? Are you serious? He sounded slightly less cavalier now. Mom and Dad will freak. They should, I said. 5 minutes. I hung up. He didn't call back in 5 minutes. He called back in 7, probably after a frantic consultation. Okay, I can't come now. I've got, plans, but I'm sorry, all right? Seriously, didn't mean for it to get that out of hand. His apology sounded about as sincere as a politician's promise. Save it, I said. I'm calling Mom and Dad. I disconnected before he could reply and immediately dialed my mother, Nancy. She answered with her usual breezy, Lacey, dear, how's your weekend? Not great, Mom, I said, pacing through the wreckage. I'm at the nest, or what's left of it. Oh. Her voice sharpened slightly. What happened? Is everything all right? No, Mom, everything is very much not all right. Brad had a party here. The place is destroyed. Furniture broken, walls defaced, my things smashed. I kept my tone factual, letting the words themselves carry the weight. There was a brief silence. I could almost hear her processing, calculating. Oh, Brad, she sighed, a familiar note of exasperated fondness in her voice that always set my teeth on edge. He's just being young, Lacey. Boys will be boys, you know. Boys will be boys. I repeated, incredulous. Mom, this isn't some spilled milk. This is thousands of dollars in damage. Malicious damage. I heard my father, Marcus, murmur something in the background. Nancy continued, her voice soothing, placating. Well, I'm sure it's not as bad as all that. You always did have a flair for the dramatic, dear? You have insurance, right? That's what it's for. My jaw tightened. Insurance isn't for deliberate vandalism by family members, Mom. And even if it were, there's a deductible, and my premiums would skyrocket. Not to mention the sentimental value of things that are irreplaceable. Oh, sentiment, she dismissed with a wave of her hand I could practically see. Now, Lacey, don't make such a big deal out of it. Your father and I will talk to Brad. He'll get a stern talking to. Don't you worry. A stern talking to? I almost laughed. He needs to pay for this. He needs to understand there are consequences. Then came the kicker, the line that had been the soundtrack to so many of my brother's bailouts. Lacey, be reasonable, Nancy said, her voice taking on that slightly martyred tone. You know Brad doesn't have that kind of money. He's still finding his feet. Besides, and here her voice brightened, as if delivering a perfectly logical solution, you can afford it, unlike him. It's a bit of a mess, sure, but you can just get it cleaned up and replace what's broken. It'll be a write-off for you, probably. My father finally spoke, his voice echoing Nancy's sentiment. She's right, Lace. It's unfortunate, but let's not blow this out of proportion. Family helps each other out. Family helps each other out. They meant I help Brad out, and they help themselves to my patience, my resources, my goodwill. The familiar burn of resentment flared, but this time something else mixed with it, a cold, hard clarity. They would never change. They would always shield him, always expect me to be the responsible one, the one who absorbed the costs of his irresponsibility. I looked around the ruined room, at the chill-out notes still mocking me from the fridge. My anger, which had been a raging inferno, began to cool, condensing into something solid, something unbendable. I took a slow breath. Okay, I said, my voice surprisingly calm even to my own ears. I could hear them exchange faint sounds of relief on the other end. They thought they'd won again. Don't worry, I continued, my gaze sweeping over the destruction one last time. I'll take care of it. That's our girl, Nancy chirped, all sweetness and light now that the unpleasantness was seemingly over. We knew you'd understand. Just send us some pictures later. Maybe we can help you find a good cleaner. I pictured their faces, smug and self-satisfied, completely misreading the steel in my voice. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. Right, I said. I'll be in touch. I ended the call. They had absolutely no idea. The drive back to my city apartment was a blur of simmering rage and dawning resolve. You can afford it, Mom's voice echoed in my head, each repetition chipping away at the last vestiges of my familial obligation. Afford it? Yes, I could afford to fix the damage. I could also afford to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. The first thing I did when I got home was dump my ruined weekend bag in the trash. Then I grabbed my good camera, not just my phone, and drove straight back to the nest. The 2-hour trip felt shorter this time, fueled by a different kind of energy. For the next 3 hours, I was a forensic investigator in my own life. I photographed everything. Every stain, every scratch, every broken shard of glass. Wide shots of the rooms, close-ups of the damage. I took macro shots of the gouges in the coffee table, the marker on the cupboards, the rip in the sofa. I filmed slow, panning videos, narrating quietly what each item was, its approximate value, and the nature of the destruction. The digital mountain of evidence grew. Back in my apartment, I spread printouts of the security footage stills across my dining table. Brad mid-throw. Brad smirking at the camera. His idiot friends' faces clearly visible, participating in the vandalism. The next morning, I called Anaka. She's my rock, the kind of friend who tells you when you have spinach in your teeth and when you're being a doormat. I laid it all out, the discovery, Brad's pathetic excuses, my parents' infuriating dismissal. Lacey, that's beyond awful, Anaka said, her voice tight with anger on my behalf. They expect you to just what, smile and write a check after he treated your sanctuary like a public toilet? Pretty much, I sighed. Standard operating procedure for the Hayes family, starring Brad as the golden child and me as the First National Bank of Lacey. Not this time, Anaka said firmly. This time you burn it all down. Metaphorically, of course. Mostly. That's the plan, I said, a grim satisfaction in my voice. I'm documenting everything. I mean, everything. Good, she said. Itemize it. Every single cent. And don't just bill Brad. Bill your parents. They're complicit. They enabled this. They raised him to be this little monster. Her words were like a balm to my frayed nerves. It wasn't just me being unreasonable. It wasn't just me overreacting. You think I should? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Abso-freaking-lutely, Anaka said. They dismissed you because you can afford it? Fine. Let them contribute from their retirement fund. See how quickly their tune changes when it's their money on the line. That afternoon, I started compiling the list. Replacement cost for the custom sofa, $2,800. Repair and refinish antique coffee table, if salvageable, otherwise replacement, estimated $600. New artisanal mugs, 12 at an average of $30 each, $360. Repainting kitchen cupboards, $400. Professional cleaning services for biohazards and extreme mess, $500. Replacing smashed art print, $450. The list went on and on, page after page. I researched current retail prices, got quotes from contractors for repairs. I was meticulous. I was ruthless. The total, when I finally tallied it up, was staggering. Even I was a little shocked. It was well into 5 figures. Then I called Ellis, a sharp lawyer I knew from a networking group. I wasn't looking to sue, not yet, anyway, but I wanted the wording of my demands to be ironclad. I explained the situation briefly. "Wow," Ellis said after a low whistle. "Family, huh? Can't live with him, can't legally lock him in the shed," he chuckled. "Okay, so you want to send them a formal demand for damages, and you want to restrict access to your properties? Smart." He gave me some precise legal phrasing to include, making it clear that this was a serious claim for restitution of damages caused by negligence and vandalism, and that failure to pay could result in further legal action. He also helped me draft a very formal, very unambiguous new family gathering policy. It stated in no uncertain terms that effective immediately, Brad, Nancy, and Marcus were no longer permitted on any property owned by me for any reason, including but not limited to social calls, holidays, or emergencies they themselves manufactured. Any attempt to access said properties would be considered trespassing and dealt with accordingly. The final package was impressive, a thick sheaf of papers, a cover letter detailing the incident and my profound disappointment, the multi-page itemized bill with copies of receipts and quotes, selected glossy photo prints of the worst damage, and the new family gathering policy. I made 2 identical sets. That evening, I stood in line at the post office, 2 large manila envelopes addressed separately, one to Brad, one to my parents. I paid for registered mail with return receipt requested. The postal clerk stamped them with a satisfying thud. As I walked out, the city lights seemed a little brighter. A weight I hadn't fully realized I was carrying had begun to lift. They thought I'd just roll over, absorb the cost and smooth things over like always. They thought their dismissive words and Brad's pathetic sorry would be enough. They had no idea what was coming. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about respect, my respect. And they were about to learn its price. 2 days later, the email notifications pinged on my laptop. Delivery confirmed. One for Brad, one for Nancy and Marcus. I imagined the scene at their respective homes. My parents probably settling in for their evening news, perhaps Nancy complaining mildly about how dramatic I was being over a little mess. Brad likely still in bed or gaming, annoyed at having to sign for something. I pictured my mother, Nancy, picking up the thick envelope from the hall table, frowning slightly at the official-looking registered mail sticker. "What's this, Marcus?" she'd call out, tearing it open with a perfectly manicured nail. She'd expect a check, or at least a letter full of angst and recriminations that she could easily dismiss. Instead, her eyes would scan the formal cover letter, the polite but firm tone a stark contrast to the emotional outbursts she was used to from me when pushed too far. Then the bill, page after page of itemized destruction, each line a testament to her son's recklessness and her own willful blindness. The numbers would leap off the page, not a few $100s for a cleaner, but a sum that would make even their comfortable suburban eyes water. I could almost see her face paling, her hand flying to her mouth. "Marcus. Marcus, you need to see this." My father, Marcus, ever the pragmatist when it suited him, would take the papers, his brow furrowing. He'd flip through them, his expression hardening as he saw the cold, hard figures, the undeniable photographic evidence. The crystal-clear stills from the security footage would be particularly damning, Brad red-handed, his friends' faces visible. No more boys will be boys now. This was documented. Undeniable. And then the new family gathering policy. Not a suggestion, not a request, but a formal declaration. Banned from the nest. From my city apartment. From any future property I might acquire. Effective immediately. For any gatherings. The finality of it, the sheer audacity from their perspective, would likely render them speechless for a moment. At Brad's apartment, the scene would be different but the shock similar. He'd probably rip open his envelope carelessly, expecting a lecture, maybe a demand for a token apology payment. The sheer volume of paper would surprise him. He'd scan the bill, his eyes widening. He wouldn't understand half the terms, but the final figure at the bottom, that he'd understand. He'd see the photos of himself caught in the act, looking like a fool. He'd read the policy, the words banned in trespassing finally penetrating his thick skull. His usual bravado would likely crumble, replaced by a dawning panic. He couldn't chill out his way out of this one. I imagined the frantic phone calls between them. Brad, probably hysterical, she's crazy. She can't do this. You have to talk to her. Nancy, her voice shrill with indignation, this is outrageous. After all we've done for her. The ungrateful child. Marcus, perhaps a little quieter, a little more shaken, realizing the carefully constructed bubble of their family dynamic had just been violently popped. He'd always relied on Nancy to manage these emotional things, but this was different. This had figures and legal-sounding phrases. My phone, which had been peacefully silent on my desk, suddenly lit up. Incoming call, Mom. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. A second later, incoming call, Dad. I let that one go too. Then, almost immediately, incoming call, Brad. Ignored. The phone buzzed again. A new voicemail. It was Nancy. I pressed play, holding the phone slightly away from my ear. Lacey. Lacey. You pick up this phone right now. What is the meaning of this ridiculous piece of paper? How dare you, after everything? Your own brother. This is beyond. Her voice was a torrent of sputtering outrage, a far cry from the dismissive calm she displayed just days before. I listened for about 10 seconds, enough to get the gist, then with a small, almost serene smile, I tapped delete. My phone immediately started ringing again. Mom. Silenced. Then Dad. Silenced. Then Brad, his call display picture a goofy selfie that now just looked pathetic. Silenced. A string of texts started to come through. Mom, call me immediately. This is unacceptable. Dad, Lacey, we need to discuss this. This is not the way. Brad, WTF, are you serious? You can't do this to me. Brad, Mom and Dad are freaking out. Call them. I read them, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. The panic in their words was a stark contrast to the quiet hum of my apartment. They were reacting exactly as I had anticipated. Their world, where I was the ever-reliable, ever-forgiving safety net, had just been upended. I poured myself a glass of water, the silence in my apartment feeling richer, deeper than it had in years. The peace was already beginning. They thought they could break my things, dismiss my feelings, and I would just absorb it. They were learning, perhaps for the first time, that actions have consequences, and my ability to afford it also afforded me the ability to draw a line so thick, so permanent, they'd never be able to cross it again. The barrage of calls and texts continued for days. It was like a digital siege. First came the outrage, the sputtering disbelief I'd already sampled. Then it shifted. The voicemails became a masterclass in manipulation. Lacey, honey, it's Mom, Nancy's voice, usually so assured, now dripped with a saccharine, wounded tone. I just don't understand. How could you do this to your family? To us. We love you. This isn't like you at all. Are you okay, dear? Is something else bothering you? You can talk to us, right? Because I was clearly the one with the problem. Then came Dad, Marcus, trying the disappointed but reasonable approach. Lacey, your mother is very upset. Brad is beside himself. This bill, it's just not feasible. And this policy, it's tearing the family apart. Think about the upcoming holidays. Think about tradition. We need to sit down and talk this through calmly. Brad's messages were less sophisticated, mostly a string of angry emojis, misspelled accusations of cruelty, and pathetic pleas, you are ruining my life. I said I was sorry. What more do you want? I didn't respond to any of them. Not a single call. Not a single text. My silence seemed to infuriate them more than any argument could have. A few days later, a new number popped up on my caller ID. I didn't recognize it, so I let it go to voicemail. The message was from my Aunt Valentina, Mom's sister. Her voice was syrupy sweet, oozing concern. "Lacey, darling, it's your Aunt Valentina. Your mother called me. She's terribly worried about you and about this misunderstanding. Honey, families have disagreements, but this seems so extreme. Brad made a mistake, a silly, youthful mistake, but he's your brother. And your parents, they're heartbroken. Can't we all just find a way to forgive and forget for the sake of family unity? Your mother said you're not even taking their calls. That's not like you, sweetheart." I rolled my eyes. So Mom had deployed the flying monkeys. Valentina had always been a bit of a busybody, quick to offer unsolicited advice and mediate disputes, usually by pressuring everyone to concede to Nancy's wishes for peace. I actually considered calling Valentina back, just to set her straight, but then I remembered Anaka's advice about Jade: justify, argue, defend, explain. Engaging would just give them an opening. So I texted her instead, a short, polite message. "Aunt Valentina, thank you for your concern. The matter is between me, Brad, and my parents. My terms are clear and non-negotiable. I hope you can understand." Her reply was almost instantaneous: "But Lacey, family is more important than money or old houses. Your mother is beside herself. Surely you can bend a little." I didn't reply to that one. Bending a little was how I'd ended up here in the first place. The next day, Anaka sent me a screenshot. "You might want to see this," her message read. It was from a rarely used extended family group on some obscure social media platform I'd forgotten I was even part of. Brad had apparently decided to take his grievances public, or at least semi-public. His post was a masterpiece of victimhood. So disappointed in some family members who care more about stuff than people. I made a mistake and apologized, but now I'm being treated like a criminal and banned from seeing my own family just 'cause she's rich and can bully everyone. Some people have no heart. #family drama, #materialistic, #sad. There were a few sympathetic comments from distant cousins who clearly only had his side of the story. "Oh, Brad, that's awful. Some people forget where they came from." My blood simmered. The audacity. He hadn't just trashed my place, lied about it, and refused to take responsibility. Now he was trying to paint me as the villain, the cruel, materialistic older sister. He really wants to play dirty, does he? I muttered to myself, taking my own screenshots of his post and the comments. Fine. If he wanted to air dirty laundry, I had a whole laundromat full of evidence he couldn't even imagine. The security footage. The photos of the damage. His charming chill-out note. My parents' dismissive texts. It was all neatly filed away. He was playing checkers while I was setting up a chess game he couldn't possibly win. This little smear campaign was just another nail in his own coffin. My resolve, already diamond hard, gained another layer of tempered steel. He had no idea how badly he'd just miscalculated. As October bled into November, the air turned crisp and the first whispers of Thanksgiving started to circulate. Traditionally, Thanksgiving was a big production at my parents' house. Nancy lived for the performance of it, the perfect table setting, the elaborate menu, the carefully curated image of a happy, prosperous family. While they hosted, I was always expected to contribute significantly: a couple of elaborate side dishes, the expensive wine, often a hefty financial contribution towards the turkey and other supplies. Sometimes they'd even suggest a pre-dinner appetizer gathering at my city apartment because it was more modern or had better parking for some of the out-of-towners. This year, however, a giant Lacey-shaped wrench had been thrown into their holiday machinery. The bill for damages to the nest remained unpaid. The new family gathering policy remained firmly in effect. After the initial flurry of outrage calls and manipulative texts, a strange sort of silence had descended from their end, at least directly to me. It was the kind of silence that precedes a storm. They were clearly stonewalling on the payment, probably hoping I'd just give up, or that the looming holiday would force my hand. Then the indirect pressure started. Aunt Valentina called again, her voice even more strained. "Lacey, your mother is trying to plan Thanksgiving, and she's just at a loss. She doesn't know what to do about you. Surely you're not going to let this ruin Thanksgiving for everyone? Aunt Valentina, I said, my voice calm and even, my plans for Thanksgiving are my own. The situation with my parents and Brad is separate. They have the bill, and they have the policy. Nothing has changed. But it's Thanksgiving, she wailed, as if the holiday itself possessed magical powers of absolution. I politely ended the call. A few days later, an email landed in my inbox from Nancy. Subject: Thanksgiving plans. The email was a masterpiece of passive aggression and denial. It outlined the usual Thanksgiving dinner details at their house, then casually added, Lacey, we'll need you to bring your famous pecan sweet potato casserole and the cranberry orange relish, and perhaps you could host a small cocktail hour at your place around 1 p.m. before everyone comes over here. It would be lovely to see you and clear the air. We need to put all this unpleasantness behind us and come together as a family. No mention of the 5-figure bill. No acknowledgement of the ban. It was as if my registered letters, the photos, the legalistic policy had all been a figment of my imagination, a temporary tantrum they were benevolently willing to overlook if I just came to my senses. I stared at the email, a humorless laugh escaping me. The sheer unadulterated gall, Anaka exclaimed when I read it to her over coffee. She just shook her head. They are genuinely living in another reality, aren't they? Clear the air? The air is crystal clear, Lacey. You've made your position perfectly plain. So what do I do? I asked, though I already knew. You make your own Thanksgiving plans, Anaka said, her eyes sparkling. Quiet, peaceful, and utterly devoid of drama. My place, your place, fancy takeout, sweatpants, the world is our oyster, my friend. The thought was incredibly appealing. A Thanksgiving without the forced smiles, the undercurrents of resentment, Nancy's subtle digs, and Brad's entitled whining. It sounded like paradise. Done, I said. My place. We'll order in from that amazing Indian place and watch terrible movies. Perfect, Anaka grinned. I didn't reply to Nancy's email. My silence was my answer. A week later, another email, this time from my father, Marcus. It was shorter, more direct, but equally delusional. Subject: Thanksgiving contributions. Lacey, your mother is getting anxious about the arrangements. We'll be by your place on Thursday morning, say around 10 a.m., to pick up your usual contributions for Thanksgiving dinner, and we can all talk then. Like a normal family. This has gone on long enough. Not a request. A statement. As if they could just summon me, command my compliance, and override my clearly stated boundaries by sheer force of will. They were actually planning to just show up. The arrogance was breathtaking. This time, I did reply. A single, concise sentence. My policy stands. Any uninvited appearance at my properties will be considered trespassing, and I will act accordingly. The bill for damages to the nest remains outstanding. I hit send. The ball was back in their court. Let them try. I was ready. The thought of a confrontation didn't fill me with dread anymore, it filled me with a grim sort of anticipation. They wanted to push. I was about to show them just how hard I could push back. Thanksgiving was indeed looming, but the only pressure cooker I was interested in was the one simmering with my own quiet, delicious plans with Anaka. Thanksgiving morning dawned bright and chilly. Instead of the usual frantic rush of baking and packing, my apartment was an oasis of calm. The rich aroma of coffee filled the air, and Anaka was already there, curled up on my sofa in fuzzy socks, flipping through streaming services for our terrible movie marathon. We were planning a feast of takeout later. Zero stress involved. Around 10:05 a.m., right on schedule for their threatened arrival, my apartment buzzer shrieked, not the polite, quick buzz of a delivery person, but a long, insistent, demanding blare. Anaka raised an eyebrow. Showtime? Looks like it, I said, a strange calm settling over me. I picked up my phone, already set to record video, and walked to the intercom. Yes. Lacey, it's us. Open the door. Nancy's voice, sharp and impatient, crackled through the speaker. I'm afraid I can't do that, Mom, I replied, my tone even. As I stated in my email, uninvited appearances are not welcome. Don't be ridiculous, Lacey. It's Thanksgiving. We're here to pick up your contributions and talk, Marcus chimed in, his voice booming slightly. There are no contributions, I said, and we have nothing further to discuss until the bill for the nest is settled. A frustrated sigh from Nancy. Lacey, open this door right now, or I swear. I walked to the door, phone still recording, and peered through the peephole. There they were, Nancy, Marcus, and lurking behind them, looking sullen and uncomfortable, Brad. Nancy's face was flushed, Marcus looked stern, and Brad just looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I opened the door a crack, the security chain still firmly in place. In my other hand, I held a neatly folded copy of the new family gathering policy in a crisp, official-looking document Ellis had helped me prepare, a formal cease and desist letter reiterating the trespass warning. What part of uninvited and trespassing was unclear? I asked, my voice quiet but firm. Nancy pushed forward. Don't you take that tone with me, young lady. We are your parents. You will let us in, and we will sort this nonsense out. She actually tried to push the door further open, rattling the chain. No, I said, holding my ground. You are not coming in. This is my home. Your presence here after being explicitly told not to come is trespassing. Marcus stepped forward, trying a different tactic. Lacey, please, he said, his voice softer, attempting to sound reasonable. Think of your mother. Think of the family. Don't do this. This isn't you. You have a good heart. Let's just talk. My good heart has been taken advantage of for years, Dad, I said. And my good heart is telling me to protect my peace. The terms are clear, pay the bill, respect my boundaries, then maybe we can talk. Until then, you need to leave. Brad, who had been scowling silently, finally muttered, You're a real, you know that. And you're a destructive, entitled brat who still hasn't paid for the thousands of dollars of damage you caused, I retorted coolly, my eyes locking onto his. He actually flinched. It was then that Nancy escalated, her voice rising to a shout that probably carried down the hallway. We know you don't really mean this. You always come through for family. You wouldn't dare turn us away on Thanksgiving. It's unnatural. Just as she hit her crescendo, the door to the apartment opposite mine opened a crack. Mrs. Henderson, my elderly, sweet-faced, and surprisingly observant neighbor, poked her head out. She'd been a resident in the building for decades and knew everyone's comings and goings. Oh, Lacey dear, Mrs. Henderson said, her voice clear and carrying. Though she was addressing me, she had a clear view of my parents and Brad clustered at my door. I meant to tell you, I was watering my plants on my balcony that Friday, you know, the weekend before last. I saw Nancy and Marcus here, she nodded towards my parents, dropping young Brad and a whole carload of his rather rowdy-looking friends off at the end of your lane, the one that goes up to your little vacation place. I thought it was a bit odd they didn't drive all the way up or stop in themselves, just sort of waved them off. Quite a noisy bunch they were, too. A stunned silence fell. My parents froze. Nancy's mouth, which had been open mid-rant, snapped shut. Marcus's face went from stern to a sort of pasty gray. Brad looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. Mrs. Henderson, bless her unintentional, perfectly timed intervention, had just torpedoed their entire narrative of ignorance and boys will be boys. She'd placed them at the scene, not just as enablers after the fact, but as facilitators before it. They hadn't just known Brad had a key, they'd actively delivered him and his hoard to my doorstep. I simply looked at them, my expression unyielding. The fight visibly drained out of them. Nancy opened and closed her mouth a few times, but no sound came out. Marcus just stared, looking utterly defeated. Well, I said into the silence, my voice still calm, that's illuminating. They mumbled a few incoherent, blustering remarks about misunderstandings and Mrs. Henderson being mistaken, but their hearts weren't in it. The public humiliation, the irrefutable implication of their deeper complicity, was too much. Defeated, they began to retreat. Brad shot me one last venomous glare before being pulled away by Marcus. As they shuffled towards the elevator, I called out, loud enough for them, and possibly Mrs. Henderson, to hear clearly. The bill is still due. Interest accrues daily. And by the way, I've shared copies of the security footage, Brad's charming social media posts, and this delightful interaction with the rest of the family. Happy Thanksgiving. The elevator doors dinged open. They couldn't get in fast enough. The peace that descended as the doors slid shut was the most satisfying sound I'd heard all day. The silence that followed their retreat down the hallway was profound. Anaka emerged from my living room, a slow grin spreading across her face. "Well," she said, "that was more entertaining than any terrible movie we could have picked. Mrs. Henderson for the win." "Tell me about it," I said, finally letting out a shaky laugh, the adrenaline starting to fade. "I should send her a thank you bouquet." Our Thanksgiving was as planned, quiet, peaceful, and filled with delicious Indian food and genuinely terrible B-movies. There were no passive-aggressive comments, no demands, no expectations, just easy conversation and the comfort of genuine friendship. It was the best Thanksgiving I'd had in years. In the days that followed, the fallout from the Thanksgiving showdown, as Anaka dubbed it, began to ripple through the extended family. My cousin Kylie, who had always been more level-headed than most, called me a few days later. "Lacey," she began, her voice hesitant, "so, Aunt Nancy is telling everyone you threw them out on Thanksgiving after they just wanted to talk, and that Mrs. Henderson is a confused old lady." "Is she now?" I said calmly. "Funny, because I have a crystal-clear video of the entire interaction, including Mrs. Henderson's perfectly lucid statement. And I also have the security footage from the nest, Brad's charming social media confession, and copies of their dismissive texts when I first told them about the damage. I shared a little highlights reel with a few select people. Perhaps you'd like to see it." There was a pause. "Oh," Kylie said. "Actually, Uncle Robert already forwarded something like that. It's pretty damning, especially the part where Brad is literally swinging from the rafters." The grapevine, it turned out, worked both ways. Once a few key, less biased relatives saw the actual evidence, the visual proof of the destruction, Brad's arrogance, my parents' complicity confirmed by Mrs. Henderson, and their aggressive behavior at my door, Nancy's narrative of the misunderstood son and the cruel, unforgiving daughter began to crumble. The bill, however, remained unpaid. My lawyer, Ellis, sent a follow-up letter, a bit more strongly worded this time, hinting at small claims court and the public record that would create. About a week after that, a certified check arrived in the mail, not from Brad, of course, but from Nancy and Marcus. It was for the full amount. Every last cent. There was no note, no apology, just the check. I deposited it immediately. The satisfaction was immense, not just for the money, but for what it represented. Accountability, finally. Kylie called again a few weeks before Christmas. "Things are tense over here," she reported. "Aunt Nancy is apparently a wreck, not because she's sorry, from what I gather, but because everyone knows Uncle Marcus had to take out a home equity loan to cover that bill you sent. They're not hosting Christmas this year, say they're not feeling up to it. First time ever." "And Brad?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Total pariah," Kylie said bluntly. "None of his usual enablers in the family want anything to do with him after seeing what he did. He apparently had some kind of meltdown when he realized no one was bailing him out of this, financially or socially. Word is he's actually had to get a real job, part-time, stocking shelves." A faint, fading sadness touched me then, not for them, but for the family I wished I'd had, the one that existed only in greeting cards and holiday movies. But it was quickly overshadowed by a profound sense of peace. The constant anxiety of waiting for the next demand, the next guilt trip, the next act of disrespect, it was gone. My apartment felt lighter. The nest, which I was slowly and lovingly restoring with the money they'd paid, felt like my sanctuary again. I didn't spend Christmas with them, obviously. Anaka and I started a new tradition, a quiet dinner, good wine, and volunteering at a local shelter on Christmas morning. It felt meaningful. Real. The calls and texts from Nancy, Marcus, and Brad eventually stopped altogether. The silence from their corner of the world was no longer a precursor to a storm but the calm after it. I heard through Kylie that Nancy tried a few times to rally support, to paint herself as the victim of an ungrateful daughter, but the evidence I'd shared had done its work. People knew. My life became my own. Truly. I realized that my ability to afford it wasn't just about money. It was about affording myself peace. Affording myself respect. Affording myself the power to draw lines and enforce them. Sometimes the only way to win your peace is to be willing to go to war for it, even if the battlefield is your own front door and the enemy shares your blood. And let me tell you, the taste of that hard-won peace. It's the sweetest victory of all. If you're out there dealing with your own Brads and Nancys, know this: your peace is worth fighting for.